Hello everybody, James here. So it's a huge shock to the wrestling world that Sid Eudy, most well known professionally as Sid Vicious and Sycho Sid and Sid Justice, in his first WWF run, has died at the age of 63. A shock to me because Dutch emailed me like 20 minutes ago saying it, so it's been a stunning revelation of something that I had no idea that he was sick in the first place. So we will go to the Facebook page of Gunnar Eudy, Sid's son, and he says, "In memory of my father Sid Eudy. Dear friends and family, I am saddened to share that my father, Sid Eudy, has passed away after battling cancer for several years. He was a man of strength, kindness and love, and his presence will be greatly missed. We appreciate your thoughts and prayers as we grieve this loss. Details for a memorial service will be shared soon. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, Gunnar Eudy." So, I don't know how many of you know this, but my eyes are going to be darting back and forth again because I've written quite a lot down. But Sid was actually a product of Memphis wrestling. So, he was discovered by Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo. He was trained by Tojo Yamamoto. And he wrestled his first months in Memphis under the hockey mask as Lord Humongous, another gimmick ripped from the Mad Max franchise at the time. And, of course, as a giant killer heel, of course, he worked with Jerry Lawler. So his most famous name, of course, Sid Vicious, was taken from the Sex Pistols basis, but was actually suggested to him by our own Dirty Dutch Mantell. Briefly appearing in Florida and Dallas and Japan, and also for the Fullers as well, where he worked with his childhood friend, in quotation marks, Shane Douglas, because it was just for storyline purposes, as well as a return to Memphis as Sid Vicious. Sid's big break would happen in the faltering WCW, so they were obviously looking for new talent and cheaper talent, which would obviously mean there were greener talent as well. So to eventually replace the higher priced talent, and Sid was paired with Danny Spivey to get some experience, and they formed the Skyscrapers, managed by Teddy Long. Memorably, they gave a jobber the beating of a lifetime on television because the jobber refused to job because apparently it was like his hometown or something, and he wanted to look good, despite the fact that he was a jobber and that was not his role. Immediately, Sid had the body, he had the height, he had the intensity, he had the aura of a megastar in the making. His wrestling ability, however, was pretty poor, even for the time, for a big man. He moved like Frankenstein, he was really stiff, and he didn't know what he was doing in the early days. But that didn't mean that with the right person, he couldn't appear, like he knew more than he was, like so many who could, be led in that sense. But certainly in his later years, Sid certainly had quite a lot of decent matches and quite a few really good matches as well with the right opponents. Sid was boosted up the ranks fairly quickly in WCW. He wrestled all the greats at the time, or most of the greats at the time, including having singles feuds with Lex Luger and Sting. He appeared at War Games, and of course he joined the Four Horsemen for a short spell as well. The WWF came calling in 1991, getting paid tons and tons of money to be Lord over there, and he debuted somewhat bizarrely for my taste as a babyface because he just exudes heel, especially at that time. But his promos were dark and intense and focused, and still do pretty much heel promos. I don't know why they did him as a babyface, but anyway, he got huge reactions, of course. And despite some of the all-time greatest flubs, and we're talking about promos here, like Half the Brain You Do, and Sorry, Can We Start That Over, when it was a live shot with Jim Ross interviewing in the back, he was really one of the most notable promos of the 1990s. And he gets overlooked when, you've got so many like your Austins and Rocks and your Bretts when he was a heel, and Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair, of course, etc. That he sort of gets brushed over for, quite frankly, being one of the best promos at the time, and I don't know why, because he really came out with some really great ones, and I suggest one specifically, one he was in the Alamo Dome for as a build-up to the Royal Rumble in 1997 when he was going to give Shawn Michaels his rematch. Sid, back in 1991, he special refed the SummerSlam 1991 main event between Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior. That's the one where Ultimate Warrior held up the company and Vince fired him, in quotation marks once again, versus Sergeant Slaughter and his comrades. Then he memorably turned heel, which he didn't. He just eliminated Hulk Hogan legally out of the Royal Rumble, and Hulk Hogan took it like a total bitch. And then Ric Flair would eliminate Sid. And Sid would actually turn heel on Hulk Hogan properly in a tag match and screw him over, which would lead to the WrestleMania 8 match, where Sid would main event with Hulkster. And then Sid will also be the first person to kick out of the vaunted atomic leg drop of doom. But that was more because Papa Shango, who was supposed to be interfering, was late running down the ramp just because the entrance ramp to the ring was so huge a distance because it was in a stadium. Anyway, Shortly thereafter, WrestleMania 8, Sid would be fired for failing suspended for failing a drugs test, even though Harvey Whippleman at the time was providing some of his tests. So he was suspended. I believe it was meant to be for like 6 weeks. He was allowed to do the European tour first. I had that match 92. I can't remember. European Rampage. That was it. I think it was in Sheffield. And I think he takes like a tombstone or a chokeslam from Undertaker or something like that. And then he sort of takes it and then goes, okay, and then just get straight back up again. I guess when you're going to be suspended and you know you're going to leave the company, you might as well not bother selling. He was suspended, as I said, and then instead of returning 6 weeks later or however long it was going to be to wrestle the Ultimate Warrior around the loop, he decided that being unemployed was better, and he went to pursue a career in softball instead. One of the many reasons why his nickname backstage was Softball Sid, because especially in WCW at that time, he would just drop bookings or not turn up or mysteriously, get injured on certain weekends when the softball's on, and he would actually just be going and playing that instead. So Sid would return to WCW in 1993 briefly, and then he would get in a stabbing match with Arn Anderson during a UK tour with a pair of scissors. I'm sure you know that story. Also throughout WCW's creative plans for a while, because they were taping so many episodes of WCW Worldwide or Pro, whatever it was, or whatever, I don't know what it was, in advance, or it might have been Saturday night, in fact, in advance, that they had, Sid doing whatever, I guess, and then they had to sort of like write him out the story, which was really difficult since he was all over the TVs. So it took 2 years for Sid to actually make it back, or maybe 18 months, to make it back to one of the big two, and the WWF this time would give him a chance. Then he was Shawn Michaels' bodyguard for several months, and then Sid would turn on Shawn Michaels the day after WrestleMania 11, that was the one in Connecticut, and give him 2 powerbombs, giving Shawn some time off, because he was injured, but actually he wasn't. And he just wanted to take the spring off, I guess. The most important time, I guess, in Sid's life was in 1990. In fact, before we get to that, when he wins the WWF title, he was let go again. Vince swore off him, I'll never use him again, because he's flaky or just for whatever reason, he just didn't like him. And it was actually the Clique who sort of brought him back in the first place because they vouched for him. And Ultimate Warrior, once again, he was meant to be headlining International Incident. That was In Your House, I want to say 10, but maybe it was 8 or so. I don't know what it was. I can't remember the numbers. Mid-96. And Ultimate Warrior was no-showing booking. So Vince McMahon got rid of him. And then he turned to, of course, Sid. Sycho Sid, I should actually say, at the time. Not Sid Vicious. Or Sid Eudy, he turned to. And then Sid would stay in the company for about a year, where he would win the WWF title from Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series 96 in Madison Square Garden, after memorably hitting Jose Lothario, Shawn's manager and mentor, with a television camera. And then, of course, the rematch 2 months later in the Alamo Dome, Royal Rumble 97, you know how that goes. Now, that was really supposed to be it for Sid's WWF title run, but then Shawn Michaels lost his smile and then gave up the WWF title, which threw all the creative plans into disarray, and Sid and The Undertaker ended up being the beneficiaries, because Sid would quickly win the WWF title from Brett, I think, after the Final Four. I think it was on Raw like the day after, I think. And then he would face Undertaker at WrestleMania 13 for the title, so he gets another main event payout. Now, it's pretty much the end of his main event run. He turns up and then disappears again a couple more times before being let go for the final time in, I want to say, June or July of 97. One of the reasons he may have disappeared is because he was in a car crash. Phil LaFon was in the car as well, so that sort of necessitated him missing a couple of TV tapings. Now, another 2 years on the indie circuit, as well as a very brief appearance in ECW, Sid would return to WCW, and this is when WCW was badly faltering. It's before Vince Russo got involved, but Sid would turn up somewhere in the middle of 99, and he was one of the absolute highlights of the show. So yeah, his matches weren't great, of course, but his promos were fantastic, widely entertaining at the very least, whether he meant them to be or not. But he was one of the few people in 1999 who would actually get people to tune in for the WCW shows, because they were hard to watch, man. He was one of the few bright spots in the shows at that time, which I think a lot of people forget as well. In January 2001, and you probably know where I'm going with this, John Laurinaitis directed him to go and do a move. I think it was like a crane kick off the top rope, something like that. Anyway, he lands on one leg and then he snaps it clean in half. He told John Laurinaitis he didn't want to do it. On your head be it if this goes wrong and I get injured. And lo and behold, it went wrong terribly. He got injured. And the word through the grapevine is that he sued Turner Broadcasting and won a 7-figure settlement. So he was set financially, but obviously his health had never been worse. Doctors told him he would never run again after, setting his bone back in place and, arduous recovery and rehab. But he did indeed run again after many, many months of rehabilitating and sort of proving the doctors wrong, which is always a great motivator. He would actually turn back up a year or so later for one of those bloody awful WWA, those Australian-based pay-per-views that solely existed on ex-WCW stars and indie talent at the time. He was only an on-screen commissioner for them, though, at the time. And Sid would actually wrestle again on the indies and would briefly have a memorable turn back on WWE television as well when he powerbombed Heath Slater. He was doing a sort of like reverse legend killer gimmick where, all the legends would kill him, unlike Randy Orton who would do it the right way. And Sid's last match was in 2017. Now, I would have loved to have booked Sid for WSI, but the guy was... there's two problems, really, with booking Sid. Is one, he's incredibly hard to get hold of, and two, he's quite famous for being rather flaky with bookings, regardless of whether you paid him a booking fee or not. So... he had a podcast some years ago. I actually tried to get a hold of him through that, never heard back from it. And then he just completely disappeared off the radar as far as that podcast goes. He wasn't on Facebook anymore. He wasn't anywhere anymore. So Dutch Mantel actually tried to get a hold of him last year. He had a number for him, never got a reply from Sid. And he basically was just completely off the radar, more than he'd ever been off the radar before. And now with the revelation that he'd passed away and that his son has said they've been battling cancer the last few years, maybe that was the reason that he no longer wanted to make public appearances, which is a terribly sad thing to know, that he was suffering, and not that it was anybody else's business if he didn't want it to be anybody else's business, but he was having to deal with this illness for several years. He would have been great for him to get into the WWE Hall of Fame, and quite frankly, it's one of those ones where it's long overdue. And I know WWE's Hall of Fame is different things to different people. One, it can be a great honour. Two, it can be a payday. Three, it's not a real Hall of Fame because there isn't a physical Hall of Fame. It can be any of those things. So I don't know if Sid really wanted to be in the Hall of Fame. I hope he did. I believe he did an interview recently, actually, where he said he did. So he was doing... yeah, I've just thought about that now. He did do an interview recently. I don't know if it was on a podcast. I think it was, actually. So, or just an audio podcast, but... I believe he said there would be more of a chance when Vince McMahon wasn't in charge and Triple H was now in charge. So I clearly think that maybe he did want to be part of the WWE Hall of Fame. And I sort of lumped Sid in with someone like Vader, who was a shoo-in for anybody who knows much about anything about wrestling. But for whatever reason, he was just always passed over. And then WWE inducted Vader after he died. And Vader would have loved to have, had his moment in the spotlight. And it never happened for him, and posthumously it means nothing. I mean, maybe it means something to the family, but, Leon's gone, and now, sadly, so is Sid, so he would never have that sort of time in the spotlight. So, just to end it on, rest in peace, Sid Eudy, Sid Vicious, Sycho Sid, however you best remember him, and thank you very much for watching.